Hey everyone, I hope you had a great weekend. This is our last day of video notes. Thank you so much for putting up with this. I apologize. If you didn't guess yet, I did get COVID. I blame it on my husband because he was in Wisconsin and I think that's where it got picked up. Anyway, I will see you on Wednesday, I promise. And yeah, let's finish these notes. So I am in our note packet. I'm on page 30, so the packet with the eagle on it. We have 2 pages of notes to get through. Okay. And so, excuse me, a lot of things to draw when you see that third column on the right. So another big basic in geometry is when we look at angles, all the relationship that goes on with angles. So our first thing that we're going to talk about are complementary angles. So there's complementary and there's supplementary. And complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. So one thing that could happen, for instance, I could have in one scenario, just one angle here. And let's make that 70 degrees. And then I could have another angle. And if I might ask you, how much is the angle that is complementary to 70? Then your answer would then be 20 degrees because together they add up to 90. Another thing you might see, for instance, instead of them being separate is, we just got done with Pythagorean theorem, which has a right triangle. And I'm going to call this, triangle A, B, and C. And if you don't recall from middle school, a triangle adds up to 180 degrees. So what I could say here is if B is already my 90 degrees, I can see that because I have the box, that means A and C together have to make up the other 90 degrees. So I would say angle A and angle C are complementary to each other because together they make 90 degrees. So my pictures can be 2 separate angles or they can be within one picture. All right, let's talk about supplementary angles. So that's the other big one. Supplementary angles are then angles, 2 or more angles that add up to 180 degrees. So I could basically do the same scenarios before. I can make one angle and I could say, hey, you know what, this is 120 degrees. And then if I ask you, how much is the angle that's supplementary to it? How much would this angle be? Then it would have to be worth 60 degrees so I can get the 180. So just like before, I can have 2 completely separate angles, or I could make one picture out of it. And do this. I'm drawing, that's supposed to be a straight angle. And basically, if this angle is 110 degrees, then this angle to be supplementary to it would have to be 70 degrees because together a straight angle is 180 degrees. So separate angles, completely separate pictures, or one big picture. Now, based off of those 2 things, we have what's known as the congruent complements theorem and the congruent supplements theorem. And they basically just say the same thing. If 2 angles are complements of the same angle, or if congruent angles, then the 2 angles are congruent. So, for instance, I have 2 angles over here that go into both. So angle B. So basically, angle B is in both, right? And that means they're going to be the same amount. Because if angle B in the left equation is 30, then angle B in the right equation is 30. So as a result, so let's just write that down. If angle, I want this shut up. So if angle B is worth 30 degrees, I could put a 30 in there. I'm going to erase this though. That means in my first equation, angle A would have to be 60, and in the other equation, angle C would have to be 60. And since they're both 60, I could then say that angle A and angle C are the same. So angle A and angle C can be congruent to each other, which is written right here. Okay? All right, so the same idea just happens with the complement angles theorem. So if I say that angle A is 100, let's get a different color. If angle A is 150 degrees, then that means it's 100 oops, sorry, wrong one. If angle B is 150 degrees, then it's 150 over here. That means angle A would have to be 30 and angle C would have to be 30. So as a result of angle B being the same in the first and second equation, angle A and angle C will also have to be the same, but what we're going to use in this case is that whole congruent part. All right, some other vocab. When I use the word adjacent angles, adjacent, like when you look at a house listing, or maybe an apartment or a townhome, it might say the garage is adjacent to the house. That means they are next to each other. They basically share a wall. So adjacent angles that share a common vertex and a common side or ray, but they don't have any common interior points. So I'll draw a picture. Here's A, we're going to call this B. Here's C, and here's D. So basically, between these two angles, I have my smaller angle, ABC, and I have another small angle, CBD. They share a common ray. This is the common ray that they're sharing. This is my common ray. So again, angle ABC and angle CBD, these are adjacent because they're right next to each other. They basically share a common wall or a common ray, and that common ray is BC. All right, linear pair of angles. So when I work with a linear pair of angles, they are two and they are adjacent angles. And together, they're going to form a straight angle. So if I draw one angle, and then I draw an angle that's adjacent to it, so that means, it's going to share a common ray. So I'm going to try to do this in a different color. So here goes my other angle. And what I'm about to highlight is the common ray. Together, they're making a straight angle or 180 degrees. And so think of linear pair, think of that word linear as being a line. So two angles right next to each other, and basically they make a line, but they're also supplementary because a line or a straight angle is 180 degrees. So in this case, I'm going to show you another way we're going to start to label angles. Instead of using like this up here, A, B, C, and C, B, D, we can use numbers inside of them, and I could say angle 1 plus angle 2 equals 180 degrees. All right, another type of angle we're going to reference throughout the year are called vertical angles. So vertical angles are two angles, and they're directly across from one another when you have two intersecting lines. So basically, or segments. So if I take one line and have it intersect with another line, we have sets of adjacent angles. So I'm going to number these angles, angle 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And angle 1 and angle 2 are, I'm going to abbreviate vertical angles. And then angle 3 and angle 4 are vertical angles. So basically, if you make an X, the top and the bottom, like where those corners, those crooks are vertical angles. And as it turns out, angle 1 will be congruent to angle 2, and angle 3 will also be congruent to angle 4. They'll be the same amount. The next one is just the right angles theorem. Basically, if you have one right angle and then another right angle, all right angles are congruent. They're all the same to one another. They're all 90 degrees. And then the right angle theorem, part 2, is if two angles are congruent and they're supplementary. So that means they're the same, so x plus x. And they're supplementary, meaning they're going to add up to 180. And you solved this, you would realize that both angles would be 90 degrees, so they'd both have to be a right angle. So that's it as far as our basic vocab with angles. There's a little bit more, but we'll hit that later. So we've got complementary angles, They add up to 90. Supplementary angles, put a 90 here. Supplementary angles add up to 180. We have adjacent angles, which are just right next to each other. And then we have linear pair of angles that are also adjacent to each other, but they add up to 180. And then we have our vertical angle theorems. Those are really the big ones I need for you to remember. So let's take a look and let's do some of this practicing. We will be able to state the angle relationship pair using the most precise term, and then we're going to find the measure of angle B. So what I notice in my first picture is that I see the box and I see two angles and they add up to 90 degrees. So these are called complementary angles. And that means 59 plus B equals 90 degrees. And once I subtract that 59 over, I get B to be 31 degrees. And notice I use my degree symbol. So in our next picture, I got a lot of lines intersecting, but I want you to focus on those because there's the X and I have opposite angles. So these are vertical angles. And vertical angles are, when they're opposite of each other, are congruent. So that means automatically that angle B is 33 degrees. All right, the next one, I notice two angles that are forming to make a straight line. So one thing you could call them are supplementary angles. But remember, supplementary angles don't have to be next to each other. So if they are next to each other, the better name is a linear pair. This is the preferred name. So that means angle B plus 145 degrees equals that 180 degrees. And once I subtract that 145 over to join my 180, I'll see that angle B is worth 35 degrees. All right, next we're going to state the angle pair relationship using the most precise terms. So here it's, in both pictures, it's three angles. So in example 2 on the left one, you might be tempted to say a linear pair, but a pair are two angles. This is 3, so the best name are supplementary. And that means the three angles, so 5x plus 4. I'm going to rewrite this differently, and x minus 2 and 3x plus 7 together will equal 180. And I'm just doing this because it helps me add my like terms a little better. So if I add up all my x's, I get 9 x's. If I add 4 with negative 2, that's 2. Add it to the 7 and I get 9. And now I can just work to get x alone. First I'll subtract the 9 from the 180, which leaves me with 171. And then I can divide by 9 and I'll realize that x is worth 19, not degrees, but 19. Now, if I wanted you to find how much each angle is worth, then for instance, I could go here, put in my 19, and do that math. So that'll be, if I did do this, it would be 95, I'd add 4, and that gives me a total of 99 degrees. All right, the next one, these are making, the box is missing. This little box here is actually supposed to be over here. I don't know how it slid over. They're making 90-degree angles, so these are complementary. And that means when I add them up, I'm going to do the same thing like I did on the other one. Together, they're going to equal 90 degrees. So when I add up all my x's, I get 3x. 3 take away 1 is 2. 2 add the other one is back to 3. Okay, sorry, I had to pause the video because I had to cough. So I'm going to subtract 3. That leaves me with 87, and then I'm going to divide by 3, and once I do that, I get x, to be 29. All right, last, well, I think I'm actually going to stop the video, do a quick video for the last two. It'll be super short, but my videos can only be 15 minutes, and I'm about to hit that 15-minute marker.